But yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for attending this session on the 10 by 10 fund launch and what active allyship looks like in London's tech scene as part of London Tech Week. So my name is Emre Banye. I'm the co-founder of Mindful Team and an entrepreneur in residence at Capital Enterprise on OneTech. Today's panel, which I'll be moderating, takes a look at what active allyship looks like in the London tech scene by discussing the new launch of the 10 by 10 fund and Capital Enterprise's role as an ally. So at the end of this, I think there's, I think the Q&A section. So if you have any questions during this, please feel free to put your questions into the Q&A section and we'll be asking them at the end. Today I'm joined by two people who represent both organisations, so 10 by 10 and Capital Enterprise, and who have played and continue to play an extremely important role within the London tech startup community. So first off, we've got John Spindler, who's probably one of the most knowledgeable people in the London ecosystem and has probably met with and given advice to pretty much every entrepreneur that's going, more than anyone else, I'd say anyway. John is also the CEO of Capital Enterprise, a not-for-profit organisation in London that exists to make London one of the best places to start and grow a business. John is also an investor, co-founded both AIC and the London Co-Investment Fund. John, is there anything else you want to add to that?
At the moment, I'm also a venture partner at Luminous Ventures and an advisor on Ada Ventures, and obviously an enormous big supporter of Andy Davis.
Fantastic. And yeah, Andy Davis, like John, has met and supported a ton of entrepreneurs as well. Very much a specific focus, not necessarily, but I know that you do focus on supporting a lot of Black and ethnic minority entrepreneurs as well, Andy. Andy's also the founder of 10 by 10, a community of Black entrepreneurs, investors, ecosystem stakeholders, and also a new pre-seed fund as well. Andy's also an investor in residence for Capital Enterprise, Google for Startups, and an angel investor at Atomico. Andy, anything else you want to add to that?
And a fan of both yourself and John, who I've known for a very, very long time. I get told all the time I'm hard to pin down, in demand, all these things. And then, but every week consistently, I get asked, "Do you know John Spindler? Do you know John? Do you know John? Have you heard from John?" Nah. There's someone who is top of the mountain. Good, and happy to be here.
I've known Andy, God, what, 7, 8 years now from when he was.
Yes.
I think I had no idea how old Andy is. He kind of.
Some say 23 years old.
20, so I realised I might have met him when he was less than 18 or something.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much both. So I think that we can't really discuss the fund or have a chat about active allyship without first having a conversation about equity in the UK tech ecosystem. So as we already know, the funding figures for female founders in the UK are low. The UK VC and Female Founders Report found that for every pound of investment or venture capital investment in the UK, all female founded teams get less than a penny. Subsequently, this year, the brutal murder of George Floyd reignited the Black Lives Matter movement, which has ultimately led to a focus on Black entrepreneurship in the UK. Statistics around investment in the UK of Black entrepreneurs is quite hard to find. I know that you, Andy, have been exploring that as well as others, but they're equally as low for startups founded by Black, Asian, and those from ethnic minority backgrounds and communities. So guys, race and sex shouldn't have an impact on the ability for entrepreneurs to raise, but they do. Why is that? Does anyone want to start?
They definitely do. I mean, there's multiple reasons for it. Some of them not nice. I mean, you know, kind of most of the money in the UK is held by white guys. Mostly white guys are my age, and there's a, you know, and even if they are not openly prejudicial to people like them, they have affinity biases, you know, to invest in people like them or in similar backgrounds to them, doing similar industries to them. And I think one of the things we'll probably talk about later, and there's something obviously I've become more and more aware as I get older and of this is, and because of trying actively to find out, is you don't appreciate how much, you know, privilege you do have being male and white in the UK tech scene. It's hard for everyone in the tech scene. This is an industry that's elitist. It only backs 2-3% of all the startups it sees. But, some of that has to be there. The figures can't lie. It's, there's lots of other factors that might mitigate some of those. But one of them definitely is that if you basically have the right background, go to the right places, are the race of the predominant majority investors, are the gender of the majority investors, things are stacked in your favor. I mean, you can't get invested if you're a black male, black female, but it makes it a lot harder, a lot more hoops and loops and obstacles to go through. And I think all of us are here because, that's not just not right, it's incredibly counterproductive for investors as well. They want to come invest in good deals.
Andy, what are your thoughts?
100% agreed. I think whenever we somehow eventually, hopefully, get past racism and sexism and this prejudice, I think cultural differences make a big deal, right? When John and I do it as investors, and you've received this investment, Emma, for previous startups, and you help a lot of founders now. When people approach us for investment, a lot of time they're thinking about money today because they need it to build their startups. But we're definitely thinking about 10-year relationships. We're thinking about long-term relationships. And the thing is, I think people look at people in front of them and they feel that they don't know them enough, or the cultural differences are so far apart that they don't see themselves having a relationship today or tomorrow, let alone in 10 years. So I think there's a lot of things that need to happen on that front, just around the understanding of cultural differences and embracing cultural differences. And we do it as we're the three of us, we're online, everyone's online now, but we're based in, two of us based in London and we are in Barcelona. And, but you spend a lot of time in London from here. So we understand that this is a city that embraces cultural differences. We just don't see that applied against technology or finance enough. And that's why we're doing the work we do at Capital Enterprise, 10x10, to bridge that gap.
Cool.
I think there's difficulties to say because we're going to come on to this later, but it kind of also filters back to the startups as well. People want to have confidence that if they basically are building a good business, that there's someone that will be sympathetic and understanding of their challenges, of their market, et cetera, et cetera. And so people talk a lot about, but we do need to have more black investors. And that's one of the way to counter it, but we also need white investors to understand the prejudices or the advantages, if you want to put it in that way, that they have. That means that sometimes they're not diving deep enough to understand the growing talent that's coming from black basically businesses and other minority ethnics as well.
100%. I feel that I would understand it as black people, especially the burden put on us, and even during this last era of Black Lives Matter, that the need for us to educate and help our white counterparts understand where they're wrong and understand what differences they should make to their behaviours and engagements. And there's this extra burden on us all the time. So even something I said last week on another call with some investors, I said that one of the things I want to do, and my responsibility is to help that side, the venture community, not only discover exceptional black talent, but also understand them. But again, that's extra burden on myself to have to do that. But I'm only doing it because it's important to black founders, because as John said, we need more black investors, and there isn't enough capital out there to support these investors. So even if, and we'll get to 10x10 fund, we come in and Capital Enterprise support really early on at pre-seed, what happens next? What happens in a year from now? Where is that support? There are a lot of funds out there which should back those companies, but what do we do? How do we create that infrastructure and put those things in place through the current venture community, through the prospective venture community, who hopefully is every day rising and getting one day closer to new capital being available.
There's also another reason you need basic diversity there, because you miss opportunities. Now, a lot of the businesses that we see have a black founder. Quite frankly, it's very personal to them and it's very important to them, but actually to the business, being black doesn't really matter, doesn't give it advantage or disadvantage. You know, the fact that they still find it disadvantaged is more again, says about prejudice or maybe like a social network or other things you may talk about. But there's businesses that I recently started to see, partly because I've been helping Emma out on basically OneTech, which are markets which are markets of black consumers and black businesses. But I would have never have known being a white. It would not something I would have understood. And we demonstrated how much potential investment return there is in these markets. And that's the kind of thing you miss as well, is that basically is where the insights and the advantages come because you're selling to a community you know, and you're trying to get investment from people that don't know that community. Women have this a lot, selling women products. And I think I recently noticed it, but we have a company called Kimizi that I recently met who are redesigning basically glasses, particularly sunglasses for the black face, because at the moment they're all designed for the Aryan face. And I never really knew. I never knew that basically getting good fitting glasses is really hard as a black person. And this is a Malmö's market.
So actually, John, you've just kind of segued into a conversation that we all had. So black founders are sometimes told that they're too focused on catering to long-tail markets to raise VC funding. What are your thoughts on this? And what are the challenges here? Is this an excuse?
It's an excuse they say that is the black market. If you're selling to the black market, say that case or others that are basically selling into something, because the mainstream markets are being designed for basically white people. And therefore do not cater well enough for black people. Is they say, oh, it's too small a market in the UK because the black population is what, 3, 4, 5%. The truth is that is the case, but basically it just means that you're going to have to internationalize earlier because the overall black market is bloody enormous. You know, and it's so that's just basically means that you're starting in the UK, but UK is not your end destination. Still a great market to serve, but it's not going to be the market that will basically give you those big venture returns if it's in, say, a B2C. So I think some of that is just understanding that. And there are whole industries. The entire Israel, basically, market is based on the idea that no one sells to Israel. All those startups get out of Israel really quick and sell to the rest of the world. And I think sometimes we get too focused. It must be just a local market, and that local market has to be big, and it has to all be big with people with lots of money, and we end up basically selling and doing more property tech.
So if I may say
yeah,
so agreed on the last point of Israel, and that's interesting. I think even years ago in an island, this is like 2012 to 2014, 15, the Irish government was supporting founders. They were match funding any money raised, and they also had a lot of startups come out of Ireland and do really well. And they went straight from Ireland. They didn't go to the rest of the UK. They went straight to America and Europe. And that's because, and then when I eventually spoke to a bunch of founders there, and then I spoke to one main investor investing in like 40, 50 startups at a time, and had a majority of those who had got early exits and large exits under his belt. He just said, because Ireland's so small, he said that we have to after we've conquered Ireland, we go international. So one train of thought is that the wider market is accessible. Of course, it's been validated there in Israel and Ireland. It's just no reason why it shouldn't be validated here. But two, and this is more what I think. When people say that black market's a niche, that's so interesting because I ask why. They'll say because there's 3 to 4% black, I think it's 4.8% or so black people in the UK right now. And I say, okay, cool. I said, how many black people do you think there'll be in 15, 20 years time? And they say, oh, I said talking about black and mixed in the UK. And they're, oh, maybe at 20, 25%. I'm like, oh, okay, is that a minority? And it's like, oh, no, that's a large number of people. I'm like, okay, cool. So that's going to be a super fast growing market, right? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, okay, well, great. So then if you go back, how I look at it is like this. If you go back to 1975, Bill Gates and Paul Allen started this organization called Microsoft, right? And they're going to put a computer in every home. What happens is people are like, oh, these devices are just for the rich. And the rich get them initially, fine. And there's a small portion of that market. And then it gets out to, of course, they're also in government and these large institutions, then wealthy people, then the middle class. Then, as we now know, we have several of these computers in our homes, in our pockets, just everywhere with us. And I kind of view it as the same thing. I think like this is going to be an increasingly growing market over the years. So if you could go back and invest, would you go back to 1975 and invest in Microsoft? If so, then you should definitely you should definitely be investing in Black founders today. It's the same thing, like it's the same story there. Or you can say it's niche and miss out on Microsoft again.
And Andy's point is, if you know, today, but in the future even more so. You know, and partly this is demographic, but partly it's talent as well, and social mobility. I mean, I think it's less than 70% of people who go to university now are basically white British. So basically, if you looked at that, and that's been the same for about 5-6 years now, I think, been growing for a while anyway. In the next 10 years, basically over a third of your portfolio, given the fact that we mainly invest in founders in their late 20s and early 30s, are going to be basically, if you're a white investor, are going to have to be basically looking at Black and Asian, other minority ethnics.
Or their teams. Their teams just comprise of, their teams mainly will comprise of nothing but diverse individuals. So you look at who's behind it, and then the mafia starts to build per se, where the talent who leaves these organizations and they go on and build the next set of large organizations. It's up to you when you want to get in.
And it'd be good to get the data. There is an advantage at the moment in women because there is data there, and that means there's more action there. And I know that people like, you know, kind of Tom and his group at Extended and others are trying to get this data out. I think once we get the proper data, it won't be just anecdotal. I think hopefully this year or beginning next, the data will become, and it's done lots of wonders for female founders. That data came out about 2-3 years ago to basically get action to be done. And I'm hopeful that will be the same when we get the data on basic Black and other basic kind of non-white basic founders.
100%. So look, we've taken a little bit of a look at some of the reasons why a fund like the 10x10 or 10x10 fund are needed. Andy, first off, huge congrats on raising, is it $3 million now?
I think it's $3 million, yeah, committed.
Yeah, $3 million to back Black pre-seed stage founders in London. I think this is an opportune time to tell us a little bit more about the fund. Who is it for? How does it work? When does it launch? Are there still opportunities for stakeholders and funds to get involved? Yeah,
sure.
Talk to us.
Thank you. So firstly, thanks to everyone who's committed to the fund. Massive thanks to Capital Enterprise and involvement, which we'll get to in some detail. And small note for the founders. I think I keep saying this, right? And people keep telling me it's not true, which I don't know, leave it to the market. But I think anyone could have done this. And so, does that sound annoying? That sounds really annoying. Can you hear that? No, okay, fine. It's on sound outside, which is quite annoying. I put word out about the fund, and the initial aim was, I think, $500,000. And I think by the end of the first day, maybe it was at $1.5 million, and by the second day, $2 million or so in commitments. And ultimately, I feel like anyone could have done it. The difference is I just did it, right? And I think for the founders, something we know is that history belongs to doers, and that you have to do. You have to just take action and get work done, and that's all that matters in the end, right? The reason John, Emma, and I have known each other so long is because we're here today together, fine, but we've always been doing the work, no matter what the entity is or who's involved. We've always just done the work and kept doing the work. There's been no vanity around it. There's been no over-glorification of any kind. Like John, John is John's the most prolific angel investor in the UK, like most active angel investor in the UK, right? How often?
Well, pre-seed investor of all my fund, right? Yeah.
Pre-seed, yeah. So, but how many people hear that, right? Like Emma introduced herself. Emma's an exited founder, right? Exited really early in the ecosystem in London. So, but everyone's just head down doing the work. And I think that's just so important, and I can't emphasize that enough. The fund, 10x10 fund, so it's still open for commitments. Commitments for, well, the deadline for final commitments is Friday, 18th of September. And then following that, we're going to have every week I'm going to host an information session on the fund itself, and I will walk everyone through documents in the deck, another hour answering questions. I'll do that every week until the end of October, where at the end of October, the fund will actually close for wide commitments. It's a pre-seed fund investing in exceptional Black founders, invest anything from 50 to 150K per startup. Pre-seed round, so that's if you're raising up to $1 million, happy to be involved. Also happy to, for the smaller rounds, lead on those rounds as well. So if you're looking for that investor, that anchor investor to support you on your way, or who wants to talk to, I think the requirement is, again, the commitment piece, right, and doing the work. So that's founders having products in the market already, products or services in the market with at least 3 to 6 months of data. That's negative and positive data. Positive data for obvious reasons, negative because I don't like surprises. I don't think anyone likes surprises. So, and listen, I think negative data, if we see something negative, we can help optimize and avoid those things going forward. And we can actually also see how you progress as a founder through those things as well. So that's somewhat of the fund at a high level. So if you're a Black founder, if you have a Black founding team with equal or majority shareholding, definitely come and have a conversation. And the fund will be up. The fund will be up from October, so we start investments in October, and we're taking commitments from commitments up to Friday, September 18th, and anyone can invest. So it's a fund that the minimum requirement is £1,000 to be in. It's a retail fund, the angel list, and.
Is there an angel list link that maybe you can?
Oh yes, so yes, I'll put something in there. Yes.
Brilliant.
And they get the EIS, Andy, by investing.
Yes, so yes, fund, yes.
Great.
They must have spoken like a proper angel.
Fantastic. So John, CE are backing this fund. How are CE backing this fund?
Well, running an angel fund is difficult. It's time consuming. Andy is giving himself, it sounds great and it sounds exciting, but there's a hell of a lot of hard work. And believe me, one of the reasons why there's not a whole, plethora of angel funds that anyone's trying to raise now, realize, God, there's not that many angel funds as I thought. It's expensive to run, it's time consuming. And so what Capital Enterprise is going to be doing is along with one of our sponsors, going to be giving 50K to Andy to help him run the fund. Okay. We're going to cover the operational costs, or some of them, to allow Andy to basically professionalize it, to basically keep the fund going, allow him to promote it, and run all those things that people don't really tend to want to finance, which is the kind of horrible stuff, like, kind of who pays for X, who does legals, who pays for Y, who's going to basically do all the administration, who's going to be spending the time, which I'm sure Andy's going to find it difficult, which is writing those basic letters or emails when you don't fund a great team because you're not ready, or you just don't think it's a fit for you. And how I'm giving that feedback, it's very time consuming. And so the idea is to kind of get resources around the amazing Andy Davis and allow him to do what he really does well, which is selecting good teams.
And applications for this backing were quite competitive. Why?
Yeah, you're true. Yeah, well, the history is I wrote a blog saying that basically, and this is, we might go into allyship later, but I wrote a blog because my team, which is a multiracial team, pointed out that as a CEO of Capital Enterprise, for like 4 weeks after the George Floyd basically murder, that we hadn't done anything. And to some extent, that was me just basically not knowing what to do. But also just like a lot of, I think, white middle-aged men just stepping back and seeing, it's not our war. And it is. I mean, most of this problem actually in the sector is a white middle-aged male problem. It's us that need to change. So I wrote a blog. I said we basically commit 50K from our reserves to support basically funds that will be backing Black founders. Knowing that how difficult we found to see that Black founders getting funded. We had multiple applications. I wanted not to basically lead. I don't want to be involved. I want to show allyship by actually giving some money and giving my resources and support to a fund led by Black people to invest in Black people. And we had some great applications, and I won't name them all, that might be on the call saying, you know, why do you give it to Andy and Davis, who are still 3 times better than him? But in the end, we thought 10x times 10 was basically in the best position to back those types of teams at this early stage that could go on and become category leaders, basically in the British tech scene, and category leaders led by basically Black people.
Okay. So guys, let's fast forward 1, 3, 5 years into the future.
So if I may just on that, if I may on that. So and so when I actually saw the post that John put out, again, right, this just talks to doing the work, right? 3-4 weeks after George Floyd, it's hard when organisations are asking questions what to do, put a lot of the burden, as I previously mentioned, on Black people to solve these problems for them and answer the questions they have. They took Capital Enterprise took 50K and said, "This is what we're committing to this, and this is our step forward." And a lot of funds can do the same. And there are funds out there with larger pots of capital than Capital Enterprise has. Right? Capital Enterprise they looked at it and committed, and they've done it. And so it just tells you that you haven't got to start in a massive way. You can do something, but if you are, whoever you are, if you're a fund or anyone else, you can talk to Capital Enterprise about the steps they took and how they came to the decision and what it means and how it would work. But again, it's just doing the work, they committed something that's going to make the difference. They used what they have, and it's going to make a difference to many lives going forward and transform industries and change the face of entrepreneurship and provide many chances and create many jobs as a result. But it starts small, and that's what action does.
And I think actually just to kind of cap on that is because we've been doing, because Emma's been basically working for us alongside Alison and a great team, and Andy Iam and others, Deborah, on building up OneTech. And in many ways, what came to me when I started to educate myself because of George Floyd is this phrase that came from an American Black VC that is Black founders are over-mentored and under-invested. Mm. And that struck me quite harsh because I think I do believe in mentorship. I do believe mentorship is amazing. But it has to have, and partly in this world, it has to also have some end outcome. And one of those avenues is to get investment. Mm. And so that was another reason, because we're committing so much to training, mentorship, accelerators, et cetera. And I wanted to see if I could support something which would actually, in the end, put their money into these businesses.
Yeah, definitely from a bottom line perspective. So what does success look like in the next, 1 to 5 years? So obviously from a CE perspective and a 10x 10%.
Well, I'm expecting in 5 years' time that Andy Davis has about 3 PAs and we're not allowed to call in, and
knowing Andy,
transatlantic because he can zooms off because he's backed up at least 2 or 3 unicorns, etc. It's interesting because you could say I think personally there's always going to be need, and it's not just in Black Fund. You could say there's other angel groups that also want to invest in their own communities. There's always going to be a need for some of those, especially, but I also want to see that the mainstream, not just on recruiting a more diverse workforce and have more diverse partners, but see again and again that it's that basically backing founders, basically that are not like themselves, basically in terms of ethnicity or gender, or even sexuality or other things, basically is a good way of making money. I mean, in the end, all these investors are capitalists. They want to make money, kind of, etc. It's counter to their own basically aim by not doing this. So I see in 5 years' time that there will be basically, but the figures that we're probably going to get revealed early next year, the difference between the likelihood of funding if you're Black or white, that gap has significantly reduced. But I do think if you're saying there was always going to be a need for some type of organisation like 10 by 10, I don't think it's going to invest its way out of existence.
So that kind of goes on to my next question, which is around, you just outlined it now, just mentioned it, that on one side, this is an opportunity. This isn't about, charitable stuff. It's about actually providing opportunity of returns for investors. So on one side, yeah, it is that, and the other side, it's a solution to a problem. How long do you think this opportunity will exist?
So if we go to get John's answer, of course, I think, if I may answer, I think, how long will it exist? For non-Black investors, and for anyone actually, it's going to become more expensive by the year. So how long will it exist? Forever, right? Potentially, but until the problem's solved, and the problem of this, like, if it's equality or equity, I think it'll last forever, but it gets more expensive by the day, more expensive by the month, more expensive by the year. And that means if we 10x10 fund backed by CE is investing in these funds at pre-seed really early on, and a part of the and those who are committed to the fund, they'll see part of the superpower special sources. Very fortunate, for whatever reason, my ability to get in on deals early and get in when there is no deal, and help those founders get to the next level. So we win really early on economically. I think by the time they get in, it won't be too late. We'll make sure it's not too late. There's always going to be Black founders out there. There's going to be more money needed in 3, 5, 10, 20 years time. But it's going to be more expensive for them to get involved. That's why you have to act sooner. You have to not snooze and wait around too much. And it's not about believing on stuff all the time, but it's not about being sheep and just following the whole crowd. You want to take some steps today yourself and do something in small ways.
And actually, just to go back slightly, so Andy, because obviously John gave his view of what success might look like.
Yeah.
What's your view? Is it 3 PAs in
Oh no! So hopefully no PAs. Hopefully I can manage everything, right? But I say, but I think yeah, I say that. I really think that success is, we would have created category winners. They'll be dominating the market, and for the fund economically, that's something I could talk to a bit later. But I think success for us is having the whole market behind these founders, right? Having the whole market behind this. So creating category winners, having the whole market behind these founders, the whole market meaning the venture community and other investment alternatives as well. Not everything is about venture capital as well. There are different types of businesses which go on and do incredibly well at different levels of scale and in different directions. And then I think the third thing is being an enabler of the other funds as well. We're here to set a good example, a great example, and show that this is definitely an underserved asset class. Right, and that's in venture capital into Black founders, and it shouldn't be a thing, but it is, and we're here to solve that problem. So if we can enable other funds to get going, there's so many other funds out there, such as Good Soul, Cornerstone, Impact X, which are focused on Black founders, and they're going to serve them in different capacities at different stages. And we're all friends, and we're family, and we're going to work together going forward. And I think if we can enable those funds to get to the point where they have the capacity to serve any and all founders they can. So when the 10x10 fund serves at pre-seed, they can come in at seed or pre-seed with us and serve them in later capacities. That would be great. And the 10x10 fund, of course, no exact promises for the future, but I think we'll see where we'll see where we're best fit. I think right now we're focused on pre-seed, and that's great. And we understand it really well. If we need to go on and with Fund 2 or Fund 3 or Fund 4 serve the later stages, and that's something that we'll look at the time. But we're definitely here to serve and solve problems for Black founders. So if the needle in the market hasn't moved, then we will move, of course, for Black founders.
Cool. Okay, so guys, so we've touched on allyship a little bit now in this section. Obviously, with the announcement of the new fund, let's take a little bit of a deeper dive into it. So John, you mentioned it actually already, but you wrote that powerful post a few weeks ago on LinkedIn where you outlined the 3 different ways in which Capital Enterprise will be supporting Black-led businesses, effectively becoming an ally. Thank you, Laurel, for posting that in. For anybody who hasn't read it, please do after this. One of the points that you mentioned was the need for the Black-led angel syndicate that invests solely in Black founders. And obviously you provided that monetary support. In what other ways will you be supporting 10x10? And do you have plans to kind of support other organizations as well as an ally?
We probably will. Partly it's Capital Enterprise's business model, as you're probably aware, it's is that we tend to bid for money from corporates and governments and then distribute it to partners like the Founder Vines or the YSYS to deliver programs in the community. And we hope to be able to announce soon we'll have more of those. So that's developing the early stage kind of pipeline. We've been doing, as you well know, quite a little bit in OneTech, and you'd be better telling this story than I would, around the faces of entrepreneurs, around basically looking at basically diversity training and awareness in basically accelerators, VCs, et cetera, because I think one of the important things of allies, if you are a white, especially male founder, is to recognize the situation and recognize the advantages that you've had and the disadvantages others are facing daily. And for you to basically step up to say that I don't want necessarily this to carry on. And moving from inequality to equality to equity, I think that's the kind of message we're trying to go down and to look at ways on that. So we're always dynamic at Capital Enterprise, we're always trying to find things to do to basically address the difficulty always of the danger in tech is it becomes elitist. There's a nature of tech to be elitist. It wants to back the best, and some of these are basic power law games where only the rewards go to one winner, not distributed amongst all, etc., etc. But it's important that basic tech doesn't just become a closed club for exited founders like Emma, or kind of guys and girls that went to Oxbridge, or people who are being C-suite at Google or Facebook or you know, TransferWise or all the others. But it's an inclusive ecosystem, and this inclusive ecosystem is open to all talents. And I think one of the reasons we have Capital Enterprise, I'm proud to be CEO, is to try and keep on doing that. And you've got to reinvent yourself every year.
And obviously you, as an ally, you've gone through a process. It isn't just like, you know, one day you woke up and you're like, right, I'm just going to write this thing. Can you talk a little bit about the process that you've gone through to actually, as you mentioned, sort of recognizing your privilege and that type of thing, just to, just what advice would you give to
I can go to personally, because it'd be wrong for me to say in the organization, because, you know, in many ways, I've definitely not been the vanguard on this. Basically, my colleagues like Alison Partridge, yourself, etc., have been leading the way. But I did the Fearless Future, basically workshop myself and twice. I think I did it last year, and we did it for all the founders of so-called tech leaders in the UK, so Innovate UK, Tech Nation, and accelerators like EF and Techstars, etc. And to be honest, it shouldn't be an eye-opener, but it was a very big eye-opener for me, ironically, because they actually kept blindfolded or keep your eyes closed, to go through that training, to realize how much privilege as a man and as a white man I have, and how easy it is then to exploit those privileges to basically, for, you know, personally and, you know, organizationally. And only when you recognize that, you know, that actually a lot of this prejudice is actually not the fault of basically the white guys like me, and we're the ones that hold them back. Do you understand what allyship, being an ally, means? It does not mean just setting your own pros. It means empowering. It means often getting out of the bloody way, you know, and also doing experiments. I think that's really important, that we'll try things. Some of them won't work. I think Andy's will work. I'm pretty confident. I'll be shocked if it doesn't. But we have tried things that might not work, and we're going to try again. You know, and the key thing, that's what I think. But it's the one thing that does surprise me a little bit is that people like me have got to be able to step back and not be the leader. So I mean, a lot of people don't want to get involved unless they can lead and tell people what to invest in or how to invest, or etc., etc. Drop back. There are great talent out there. Give them the time. Give them the resources. Let them basically make the decisions.
Yeah.
Right.
And if I may add to that, I think sacrifice is really important, right? And it's in large ways and larger ways, such as what John and Capital Enterprise have done and are doing, and then there's smaller ways. So there's a friend of mine, Dan, who is a founder of a startup called Heights, yourheights.com, and he runs a podcast called Secret Leaders. He put a podcast called Represented, which I was involved with for Black founders to pitch to angel investors over the last few months. And he was raising for a startup and closed around, fortunately. And I said, when I was raising, I was like, do you need help raising? Do you want me to do some introductions? And he said, I would love the introductions, but actually I feel like you should save the introductions and potentially the money from those investors have for Black founders who don't really get it. That type of sacrifice is necessary, right? Last week, and it happens every week, right? Hey, can you sit on the panel, Andy, or something? There's something I wanted to do, and I just said, you know what? It was for a female-led organization, a great organization, who I would love to have been involved in, met the CEO and been there. I just said it's wrong for me to be there. Like, this just should be led by women, and let me ask a female investor friend of mine to do it instead. And she did it, such an incredible relationship. She built a great, and she's going to go on and have strong relationships and find the network's a network, that's fine. But it's the small things you do. You just sacrifice yourself, right? Getting asked to speak at whatever large hedge fund conferences and saying no because there's nothing but 5 guys on the panel about diverse investing. They really mean in the diverse stocks, not they do, and nothing else. I think there's what I was saying, me saying to them, hey, and this is 50-50 gender split on this panel. And then when you start looking at non-binary, you have to think about one or two other things that, like, like, I'm not doing it, and I don't think you should do it. And I'm happy to suggest to people too, but again, the burden shouldn't be on me, you should go do the work. So sacrificing ourselves a little bit in the time and any sort of potential benefit, there's greater good in it all. But it starts with ourselves.
Okay, fantastic.
Emma, I'll ask you, what do you think we should be doing more of?
To support Black entrepreneurs, you mean? Yeah, I think you made a point, right, about, obviously it's about sponsorship. I think it's about, going back to that famous quote, which actually was previously utilized for female founders, right? And is now sort of being passed on to that Black founders being over mentored. Yeah, I think that we need more opportunities. We looked at, in the past, we looked at things like stipends, about how can we actually support entrepreneurs during that early stage, of their process. And we're seeing more and more early stage funding being kind of wiped out, obviously with COVID, which is another thing that I wanted to actually bring up, like your thoughts on the actual early stage scene, especially with COVID and a lot of angel investors sort of not investing anymore, kind of waiting till this is all kind of sorted out. But really is about more money being flowing, let's say, from the early stages. And I think a fund like the 10x10 fund is something that's sorely needed within the ecosystem. But yeah, I think we do still need to obviously support people. We need to go out into schools. We need to start talking about entrepreneurship a little bit more as a potential opportunity for young people. I've been to talk at schools and things like that, and I went to a school in East London and spoke to like 13 to 14-year-old females, and I was astonished, like none of them really saw tech as an opportunity when you think about the fact that it's probably the biggest opportunity that exists within the UK at the moment, at least certainly where there's a lot of jobs and potential. People are still talking about, I guess, the traditional jobs of being a doctor, lawyer, and those are all great. But I feel as though the image that tech has, certainly for younger people, isn't quite that cool kind of. I think there are a lot of people that don't know that tech is for them, and that there are actually an array of various different jobs within tech. Like tech is basically almost like the infrastructure of everything these days.
It's exposure though, right? It's like I was at an event last year, a launch of a Black initiative, and as I was leaving, some guy walked past the time. He was like, "Hey, I just want to say thanks for coming." I was like, "Oh, are you one of the organisers as well?" He was like, "I know the organisers." So I was like, he was like, "Oh no, I'm not." He was like, I just came to attend." I was like, "Oh, thanks you for coming." He was like, "No, thanks for coming. I really mean it. Thanks for being present." He's like, "Oh, I hear about things you do, but to actually see you just means a lot. Actually, just you're visible and you're accessible. That means everything. I just know that this is real." I'm like, "Oh, I never thought that before that. Right? I kind of knew, but didn't really consciously think about it. It wasn't at the forefront of my mind. I think we have to do more of that. Just be present." And I'm trying my best. I'm a bit head down doing work, but I think I definitely have to sacrifice a bit more and be more present, be more visible, and make ourselves accessible so that they can see role models, they can see a path here, right? They see that, like, so that boy, Jeffrey Douglas, the one who was at the White House with the one of farmers and years ago, and he's there, and I think his father served, and he looks up to Obama, and Obama looks down and is like, oh, what's up? And he's asking him, can I touch your hair? He touches his hair. Obama says, yes, of course, touch his hair. He's like, oh, your hair's like mine. And then the question was, is your hair like mine? Obama's like, what? And he touches it. He's like, your hair's like mine. And it's like, it's madness. It's a little black boy touching a black man's hair. And it's like, your hair's like mine. And that must have changed the world for him. He was so surprised. Yeah. And that's what it is. So the question is, your hair like mine? The answer is yes, but they need to know that their hair is like ours, and that there's people here with hair like them in these industries, and that they can be here too.
Yeah, and that it's possible, especially as things evolve as rapidly as they have been and will continue to do so, right? And Andy, just to kind of I guess end, actually, because we're already 45 minutes in. Andy, when, obviously we talked about allyship, we talked about your thoughts or initial thoughts when John put that blog post up. What other examples are you seeing of great allyship within the ecosystem, and what not so good ones are you seeing as well?
What not so good? Black square things on the internet, on Instagram and Twitter and different places, not so good without anything else attached to them. And by the way, I'm a believer that work does get done behind the scenes, and that not everything you see, I think there's a question here about diversity in Africa and stuff as well. And actually there's so many investors here doing work to, and myself with my friends, other investors doing work to support founders in Africa as well, black founders. So it isn't just about the UK or Eurocentric diversity. But there's work behind the scenes. Maybe we have to make that more visible as well. What not so good? I think lip service isn't so great. It's unhelpful. I think pretend to care. What not so good? I've heard a few things. A lot of funds just don't care. Which isn't fine. But for me, I'd rather know you don't care, so we don't spend our time there, and we can qualify those who don't care, and we understand, and maybe send help per se, because not only help for any sort of biases, the issues they have over there, but also just help them get opportunities later, because clearly they're going to miss out on great opportunities with that mindset. What's been great? It's interesting. The work that you don't wait from people shouldn't wait for moments like this to do the work. You do the work anyway, and then when these moments arrive, you're prepared, and you can win as a result of that and benefit and progress significantly. There's great work being done in so many places. If I look at even Local Globe, the work they're doing, and I think in my opinion, they're trying. They're not there yet, but they know they're trying, and it's early days of having conversations, keeping them going and taking action, committing in various ways to various Black initiatives and organizations to support them on their road. And I think that's what it takes. It takes just, as what Capital Enterprise has done, it really takes just taking action with the resource you have, right? So many great people reached out really early, and they mean it, and they want to support, and they're going to continue supporting. If that's the likes of Jamu at Oma's and others, I think that's what it takes. And it's about us, and again, my responsibility is to help everyone on their way to be able to support Black founders today and tomorrow, and I'll continue to make that my responsibility as we go forward.
Okay, brilliant.
We have to have a big shout out to Atomico.
Oh yeah, so Atomico. So it's so interesting, right? So talking to people about this over the weekend, and he was like, "Oh, we don't talk enough about the work we do at Atomico," and I'm like, again, it's the head down doing the work thing. We just do the work. So I mentioned Local Globe and the initiatives. Atomico, the works are very real. You know what it is? They face their, as you say in certain cultures, they face their fronts, meaning they're facing what their problems are and addressing them. So they know that the diversity is super low internally when it comes to staff. They know that actually the investment numbers are not good enough when it comes to diversity, especially on diverse founders and then Black founders. So they've done a massive commitment to, which they released a blog post out Bryce and the team, to get word out about the differences they're going to be made. They're going to start tracking things, measuring KPIs around diversity and then black staff members and black founders they see and invest in. But they're really committed. But I'm evidence of that. I'm one of the angels there. They've got another Harry McLavity, another black angel there. Of the 12, there's 2 of us. And going forward next year, there'll hopefully be more. And thus the pool of investees they have increases, right? Who are diverse, who are black, because we're here and because of my focus. I think they're incredible, and they are like you, more than allies. They're really like they're on the journey with us, and we're all in the same car going together. And they're going there and they're doing so, and they're listening. Most importantly, they're listening, and then they're taking action, and that's really, really important. I can't say enough about Atomica. I think, and I'm not just saying it because I'm there. I'm pleasantly surprised every single time, and then eventually not surprised because it's not what I expect of them, because I know who they are, and I know that they're great allies. And I know if you're a founder, we put a word out. I put a word out last Friday, I believe, regarding our angel meetings, the pitch meetings for the Atomica pre-seed fund. Come pitch to us, because that larger fund ahead of us, we're a great group of angels, hopefully, but that larger fund ahead of us is a super fund, and the one that I had on my journey with me, and a lot of others do. So yeah.
Glad I gave Andy a chance to praise Atomica, otherwise.
Okay, guys, let's wrap up. So we've got a couple of questions from the audience. I'm going to start with Andre. Investing in minority entrepreneurs is a must to close the gap, and even more powerful is investing in teams of entrepreneurs made of minority and white, as this is rather a more powerful message to send outwards, no matter the color or gender. This is always working better when diversity and inclusion is there from the start. Any thoughts on a situation when by focusing only on any thoughts on a situation when only specifically focusing only specifically on minorities in whatever form this could possibly come with a message of not focusing on performance? Does that make sense?
Sure. So so you go back and look at the history. So firstly, there are a lot of great minority founders out there who have performed and started great organizations, sold their organizations early. Some of them are growing them, and a lot of them are going from pre-seed to seed to Series A to Series B now, globally. But I'll say as well, if you go back historically and look at the world, at one point where only upper middle class white men had the ability to vote, and then gave votes to women and people of color, and then the young age demographics. I think I remember if you go back to just upper class white men being able to vote and determine what happens in the country, they could have arguably looked around and said, "There's no reason to. The world works great. We're happy." But enabling that to happen and opening those doors made the world a better place. And so they got great performance there. The world's been better and performed better as a result. And you can more than argue the same here. So I kind of think of things as a history, and I think actually how things have panned out. And history is not a bad indicator sometimes.
I don't think there's any compromise between investing in great teams and investing in black founders. You know, I think we're in a great position, at least in the UK and London in particular, to basically just to have, Andy will have good deal flow. His issue will be trying to choose amongst it and choose the best, as opposed to trying and not. I feel that some of that is likely to increase over time as basically partly basically for social mobility. I mean, we've had you know, tech is one of the ways of basically changing your circumstances and basically get into a position where you're better off than your parents socially and economically. And the great reason why tech does attract people, and it is the slightly rags to riches, that you can change the world by being a tech entrepreneur and change it hopefully for the better. And that needs different voices. You know, we're ending the AI age. We can't have all AI built from just a subsection of the population, Chinese males white males, etc. We've got to basically broaden it out, because they will make, you know, the design of those systems will determine basically decisions are going to be made, allocations of resources, allocations of exam results, as we know, basically going on in the future. And so it's important that basically, not only as you say, people see tech as a gateway to get him on in the world and making a big difference, but we basically have the means to support those that basically do make that choice and they don't fall at the first hurdle.
Cool, great guys. Okay, we've got a couple more questions here. So Mark, during this London Tech Week event, I've seen many events and themes around diversity, but very little about aligning diversity with Africa. We have great opportunities and people in Africa. Surely if investors help grow the tech communities and economy in Africa, that will address many of the issues discussed in this topic. Is this version of diversity purely Eurocentric, or can the tech ecosystem in Africa also participate?
Sure. So if I may go first. So I partly answered before. So there's a lot of work being done, and maybe it isn't shouted about enough. There's work here by incredible investors who are investing in African-based startups, and we meet with VCs who are based in different parts of Africa, in different capacities, and we go to do deals together, speak to each other about what's happening there, and a lot of referrals get made to other investors for them. I'm on calls, so I'm half Sierra Leonean. I'm on calls with founders from different parts of Africa every month, providing some insight and advice that I can, based on any experiences I have which are relevant. There's work being done, and the needles being moved. I think for and there is something about being black, right, and black people. I think we don't forget each other, right? So we when we go together, right? That's the whole thing. If you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. And definitely on the latter end, where we plan on going far and going together. So today, again, respectfully, we have to just focus. I get asked all the time, 10x10 fund, or it can be UK-based startups. I get asked, oh, will you be in Europe? Like there's black founders in France and Germany, these places, and there are in the US there are, and but it's one day at a time. We have to focus, and trust me, if we get to focus and concentrate and deliver great results, then it'll be great for everyone in the long run. And that isn't an excuse or a cop out for anything. That's us still thinking about me 24/7, staying awake and doing the work to progress this whole culture everywhere, and no one forgets. And but things are happening out there, believe me on that front.
And yeah, I think there probably is a big gap to someone, you know, entrepreneur to create a great fund that will invest in startups in Africa. Whether that has to be in London, I don't know. Or whether that great fund will be in Africa, just as the funds that back India are in India, not in London, and the funds that back in China and the Far East are there. I think that's the issue, etc. Kind of, you know, and I think if you're saying you don't, you know, I think those great funds should be, you know, should be in Africa. And Africa also is very, you know, I don't think you need to say, it's incredibly diverse. You know, it's it only looks like one continent from here. And when you go there, it's incredibly diverse, with different opportunities in different parts of Africa, and et cetera, et cetera. So there probably needs to be more than one fund. There probably needs to be basically a dozen funds in different parts of Africa, focus on the different, basically, you know, opportunities there are there and the different ways you can build great big businesses there.
Yeah, completely agreed. And we've got a question here from Sean as well. With so much money in the funding system, I'm surprised there is more funding for non-white founders. Shouldn't investment be about the idea and the person behind the idea?
I mean, I mean, generally, yes. If we all basically had a perfect world where things such as gender and race didn't matter. But the issue where we thought there was a need for a 10 by 10, and Andy can tell his own view, is that we see businesses every day, and we see how much harder it is for both female and black founders to get that first check. You know, and how it's hard for everyone. I'm not saying it's easy for anyone. However, you know, Jacob Rees-Mogg's children probably, if they ever come up, will probably find it hard to raise. But it's basically noticeably harder for those. And so we're just basically tilting the kind of thing a little bit, not much, to be honest. There should be more if it was more impactful. No one's going to get funded from Andy's basically fund angel group who haven't got a great idea, who can't execute, who won't try and basically build a big business. He's not investing because they're black. He's investing because they're black entrepreneurs with great ability to build something big.
100%. And Sean, right, there's a lot of money in the ecosystem, and I wouldn't worry if pots of capital are going to diverse founders and black founders, women founders. I think, or non-white founders. I think the more funding, if there's more funding in the ecosystem, and there's more funding for those who have been underserved, it's better for everyone, right? Because again, we're not just investing in these software companies. There's jobs that are being created, and problems being solved, and sectors being transformed, and then new companies have come as a result of that as well. And that's the whole ecosystem and everything that comes with it as a result. I think if, in fact, and we can say, and the FBS as well, a lot of these founders will go on and become angel investors, and they'll go and invest in non-white founders, right? So the cycle doesn't end with non-white. It's they'll go and invest in non-white founders, then they'll go and invest in white founders as well, and the ecosystem hopefully will become more like what the cities that we live in and towns we live in look like and represent.
Also, it will, also I'm hoping that Andy will be able to leverage a lot of funding for these startups from basically white-led funds.
Yep.
Because, despite what I've just been saying, most funds managers I've met do want to basically diversify their portfolios. And hopefully 10 by 10 is one way, by investing alongside them, we can do that.
And if I may add, then there's one or two funds I'm sure they'll be making their own announcement soon, who are allocating X amount of capital or pots of capital to invest alongside the 10x10 fund in black founders as well. So, and those are predominantly white funds where they're probably committing 1% or so of their fund, but it's something, and the money will help move those founders forward. So in that instance, if 99% of the fund goes to white founders and then 1% non-white founders exclusively, and hopefully part of the 99% goes to non-white founders as well, then things will be better as a result. And it shows that actually it's something that everyone knows is the right thing to do, and the better the economic thing to do, then we'll hopefully see more of that as well.
And it has made a notable difference in the female founders at those funds like Angel Academy, used to be Jane, now called January VC, and others that can write the first check, get the ball rolling, start the process.
Yeah, and I think as well, we talked a little bit at the beginning about the stats, and it is very much led by those stats, and some of the ones that are coming out will be coming out soon as well. We've got another question that's just come in. So Andre, great answers and amazing what you're doing. How can we help support breaking the systematic problems that makes funding more difficult to be obtained by minorities and female entrepreneurs? Maybe some concrete examples. Thank you.
So how can we support breaking systematic problems that funding? Okay, sure. So again, the mentoring thing, I think if there are angel investors out there, then a way to do that is introducing them to black founders. If there are black angels or black people or diverse people with the capacity, it's about introducing them to these founders as well, because ultimately money moves the needle here, right? And the support, and even in industries or sectors where they are, in making those introductions so those founders can get in and get certain contracts or get certain contracts or get their products and services into certain organizations, that moves the needle. I think, and that's it as well. A 10x10 fund, I've told a bunch of people, I said, hey, give us the money, we'll do the work for you, ultimately. And that's a very light way of putting it as well, because we will do the work, and there's going to be many organizations like that who do the work. It's about supporting those organizations. A concrete example is, fine, give us the money, we'll do the work, literally invest in 10x10 fund. But then there's things you can do. Black founders, if you meet with black founders and you ask them what they need help with, if you can help, you do. And when you can't, this is an important piece as well for everyone, everywhere. When you can't help, you communicate that you can't, and you don't consume more of their time in the wrong ways, or ways that aren't helpful to both sides of the table. Because a lot of time sometimes consumed with the pursuit of helping, the desire to do so without results, and that's a burden for those founders, because their time can be better spent elsewhere, and your time as advisor can be spent elsewhere as well, helping really moving the needle for founders. So I think you want a concrete example. It literally comes down to speaking to founders, understanding what they need, and then helping where you can. And with funds, it's about just being involved in the right funds. Going, if you're an angel, back in the right funds, if you know people who have the capacity to be introducing them, getting them involved, that moves the needle. Yeah.
Right.
I think basically it's ridiculous of me to say, but if you're a founder at the moment, you know, it is slightly harder. If you're female or you're black, you're going to have to be better prepared. You know, you're going to have to fight your calls better. You know, but it can be done. I mean, there are already great black founders building great businesses. So don't be disheartened, but just be prepared. And it shouldn't be me saying, you probably all know this, but you're probably going to have to be better prepared. And that's why things like OneTech and others come in, is to try and give you as much information so you can answer the extra question that maybe your white Oxbridge male peers won't be asked, because they can get it all on trust. You know, so there is, you know, there is some of that. I'm not saying you've got to fight a little harder, and that's not great and that's fair. It should be coming from me. But there are people along the way. OneTech is a good example, but can help you get there and basically get you prepared and get those introductions and give you a fighting chance.
Okay, great. I think, yeah, now's probably a good time to wrap up. I think we said this will probably be 45 minutes. I think in the end, we've actually probably gone to the time that we were allocated.
Can I put a call out for Diversity VC event we're doing later this week?
Yeah, I was about to mention that, as well as, so yeah, go for it, John.
There's a Diversity VC event on later this week where basically we're looking at the standards and the basically that VCs are having to commit to and the measurements. And it's important that the VC industry works on data, works on numbers. We're going to basically start producing them, publishing them, playbooks on how to get better. And after time, over the next 2-3 years, you'll be hopefully be able to see that if there's been any difference. I got that right, Emma? Yeah,
you have. Yeah, so that's on Wednesday at 5:30. So anyone here that wants to attend that, I think it's part of the London Tech Week schedule. You should be able to find it within the profile area, I think. Yeah, and that's powered by OneTech. And we've also, from a OneTech perspective, we've got our relaunch on the 22nd of September. So look out for that. If you just go into the OneTech, weareonetech.org site, you'll be able to sign up for the newsletter to be informed about when we'll be relaunching. So I just want to kind of like summarize. We've talked about quite a few things on this call. We've talked about the reason why a fund like the 10x10 fund is needed. We talked about the fact that Capital Enterprise will be covering the operational cost of the 10x10 fund, or Angel Syndicate, I should say, as a great example of allyship. We've talked about the fact that allyship, or good allyship, is a process. It isn't just, you know, lip service, quick fix. So look into training, look into things like fearless futures, as John mentioned, etc. Take action, experiment, put your money where your mouth is. And yeah, and the last thing I wanted to mention was about the 10x10 fund. So there's still an opportunity to get involved for anybody that wants to, and it's going to get more expensive as time goes on. So have a look at that. Andy, I don't know if you want to add any links to that as well.
Yeah, I'll throw a link in. Again, yeah, I'll just say, listen, anyone who wants to have a conversation regarding it as well, more than happy to chat. More than happy to chat. If you fill out the commitment form, even before you fill out the commitment form, happy to have a conversation regarding what the plans are, why, and how we're going to go about it, and a lot of the special sauce per se which sits around it. And just thanks to Capital Enterprise again for just doing the work, and that's putting money up front and supporting. And we've always been a supporter of diverse founders anyway, and this just further extends that.
Cool. Any final words from you, John?
No, I mean, basically go and basically kind of invest in some fantastic businesses, Andy.
Thank you, shall do.
Great. Okay, thank you everyone. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
See you everyone. Thanks so much.
Bye.